Hi, I'm Rora.
Hi, I'm Jane,
We are Birds of Clay.
and this is Clay Connections, a short podcast series where we delve into the intersection of well-being, community, and of course, clay. We would like to pay our respects to the traditional custodians on the lands on which this podcast is recorded. We acknowledge the rich history of art, craft, and storytelling that has been occurring for millennia, and acknowledge elders past, present, and country as provider, protector, and guide. Working with clay is intrinsically linked to country, and we would not be here without the care and connection that our First Nations peoples have shown for thousands of years on this continent we call Australia. Hi everyone, we're so lucky today to be speaking with Holly Macdonald. Holly is an artist, performer, community practitioner, and someone we've admired for a long, long time. So welcome, Holly!
Yay! Hello, Jane. It's great to be here. Hello, everyone.
So we might just kick off by introducing yourself a bit, Holly, and telling everyone where you are, which is very exciting.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I suppose you used like a few of those like great words like artist and performer and community-based practitioner. So I suppose I guess I'm feeling connected to all those words, and I am I guess like first and foremost a clay-based practitioner. That kind of is at the seat of everything. And at the moment I am tuning in from a little town called Lumsden, which is in Scotland, and I'm sitting in a place called the Scottish Sculptural Workshop, and I'm here for a group residency, which is 4 weeks in the workshop with a few other artists. And I guess I'm thinking about a lot of those things, how the performance and the community and the clay come together and in this place, and I suppose just generally reconnecting with my practice, enjoying what a residency is and can be for a practice.
Roar and I often talk about how we dream of residencies. They just seem like such nice things. So I feel like we'll delve into that idea of residency in and out of this chat, because I can imagine they're quite immersive. So maybe just starting at the beginning, something we ask most people is, what's your clay origin story? So kind of why clay? How did you come to work with clay?
It's such a good question, and I feel like I suppose when you're in the studio you don't really think about how you got to that point. But to kind of be asked to kind of like spiral back to the beginning, I think something that I've been thinking about on the residency is that maybe there's not always such a logical through line. It can be a bit chaos and kind of jump and start, but I have given it a little bit of thought about where the kind of clay first entered my conscious. I suppose that creativity generally, my mum is a really creative person and an artist herself, and definitely brought a lot of creativity and kind of creative play into our childhood, and actually was at Sturt when she was a teenager and learned to throw, and so we actually have plates and bowls that she made at Sturt when she was sort of 17, back in the 70s. So I think, just like having those objects that she made, we would be eating off them and kind of using them. So clay, and kind of clay as a, dare I use the word career, but just like something that you could kind of do in your life, with your life, to move through life with, definitely was just like in the realm of possibility through that. But I think there was one other sort of, I guess, experience that I had as a child that I think might have kind of embedded an early sense of kind of transforming material. Mum and Dad built a mud brick house up on a block of land just outside of Scone, so that's Wanneroo country. So that I was about 4 or 5 at the time, and so we were kind of, my twin sister and I were cruising around in our gumboots watching the parents and sort of lots of their friends mixing the mud bricks, and I guess it's like earth and sort of some cement and a bit of, I guess, like straw to kind of get the mix and packing these bricks up and then building the house. And so, yeah, I imagine that sort of embedded in as well into the kind of where it all began. And then I suppose, I mean, I definitely had some really great art experiences, had really great art teachers in high school, sort of went to like, I guess like craft kind of after school classes in primary school. I don't know about you, Jane, but I feel like Mum definitely kept a lot of things. So I've got all these very funny little ceramic kind of bits and pieces from when I was various ages. And I suppose that's clay. It's like so accessible and kind of, I think we've all had experiences of clay in that way. So that was kind of happening during the school years. And then I did actually work with clay in my final year of high school in a sort of sculptural, pretty low key way. Like I did some fairly DIY like wood firing up at the farm. I don't know. No, it wasn't wood firing. It was more like a rock. It was more like a sort of raku or pit firing. Just like putting some clay in with lots of wood chips and leaves and things like this. But I think so. I suppose kind of like childhood, school years, like lots is going on. Who really knows? I guess like you're sort of figuring out who you are. All that's happening. But I think I suppose like where my sort of clay kind of journey really started in earnest and probably really got me to this point was, I guess, that sort of like formal study of it. And I was studying architecture and then engineering, and then just was not really connecting with either of those sort of schools of thought, kind of communities. And I think it was a lot about community, maybe. Was like not necessarily feeling connected to the people. Not finding kind of easy connections with the people that I was studying alongside. Not, like lots of great people, but I think just thinking about the world in a different way and even in a different language. And so, I guess at that time of studying engineering, I was doing some public programs courses at NAS. And that was feeling really good, and I was really connecting with that. It was wheel throwing courses. And I had teachers like Queer Chung, and kind of like on a kind of just like a little bit of an intuitive feeling of like the applications to enroll at the National Art School came up, and I just kind of felt it. I was like, I'm just gonna have a go. Like I'm feeling good about this material and like the way that I'm connecting with it and what I can do with it. And then like I sort of went through the process of applying. Was very like happy to be accepted, and rolled on through. And I sort of haven't. I mean, it's sort of it started on a bit of not on a whim, but like just a feeling, not a sort of thing of like I'm going to be a ceramicist. It's like this material feels good, and from there it's just kind of continued on, kind of until now.
Yeah, I feel exactly the same. That's how I kind of came to clay. It just was like,
is it a feeling
or a feeling? I'm just going, it feels good. And it's interesting you talk about architecture, because I'm finding all these parallels between. So I've also got a background in. I did a undergrad out of school in environmental science and regional and town planning. And so I was really interested in space and this idea of community building around space. And this conversation's come up so much recently with people who work with clay. And there's maybe some correlation between, well, obviously there is, but around this idea of space and clay and community. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so interesting that sort of, I mean, I think it's always good when practices kind of brush up against each other and overlap, because I guess that's when new questions are asked and kind of new directions are opened up. But I suppose when I sort of first shifted over to ceramics, people were like, wow, that's so like you've gone from engineering and architecture to ceramics, that's so different. And I was always a bit was a bit perplexed or like for me it didn't really feel so different. I guess it was sort of like architecture was building the house around people and kind of communities, whereas ceramics is kind of filling the house with the objects that are kind of like, I guess like subhuman scale, or kind of like within our scale, versus kind of the architecture, which is the around us scale. And they're all interconnected and important, and kind of, I guess like shift and move our lives in a similar spatial kind of tactile material way, maybe.
I think the 3D-ness of it is really important, and something I've just started thinking about is like thinking in 3D is really different to 2D for me.
Yes.
And it's interesting because like talking about space, I feel like that leads into some of the performance work that you do. So I was lucky enough to see Converge Diverge, which was a performance you did in as part of the Australian Ceramics Triennial. So that was amazing. Did you speak a bit about that, Holly?
I would love to. I suppose, so that was 2022, is that right?
I've got it written down here. 2022.
Can confirm 2022. The 16th Oz Ceramics Triennale in Ubuntua. And so I guess like a bit of context, Converge Diverge is a collaborative practice that I have with Rosalind Weitz, who's a choreographer and contemporary dancer, and usually based in Brussels, so I'm sort of close to her at the moment. But she is from Australia, and we sort of have been collaborating since 2019, and basically kind of cross-pollinating or sort of looking at the space between her dance practice and my ceramics, more clay-based practice, and sort of thinking through the essentials of kind of how do clay and dance relate to things like time and space and body in their own way, but maybe in ways where we can kind of try and pull them together. And so the action of the, I guess, participatory work that we took to the Triennale, it was called Personal Space, and I guess really at the sort of within it was this desire to be using the body as the kind of infrastructure or the kind of support for the clay and for the making in a way that was quite different to how you'd kind of do it in the studio. I guess we're usually working on a table or on a banding wheel, whereas we really wanted to kind of replace the table and the banding wheel and even the chair that you're sitting on with the body, other people's bodies. I suppose then the sort of simple kind of aim was to build a hollow enclosed clay object, and sort of like hoping that once we enclosed it, it would sort of self-support and maybe pick up some of the kind of I guess some of the process of how it had come to be formed, as in like supported by the body. Maybe some marks from the body in that process would come into the object itself. And each making session had about four or five people. I think we sort of figured out that 5 was probably like optimum. Maybe there was a group that was 6 or 7, which was actually very fun as well. But it's sort of like, at that point, there's maybe 1 or 2 people that have got their body on the clay, and then there's lots of kind of support workers, makers, busy kind of rolling the clay, passing on to the people that are maybe doing the job of joining the clay. Anyway, so it's quite an abstract kind of slightly navel gazy kind of like action or task, but really, so I suppose like from a sort of research perspective for Ros and I, it was this interest in I guess like sort of configuring the relationship between body and clay, and maybe changing the dynamic of that. Like it's quite hard all of a sudden when you're using your actual body to support the clay to control it. So kind of like letting go of control, and then really needing other people to kind of come in and help the process to get to where you want to get to. And then I guess and clay is so good at this. Like what became really interesting was just the intimacy and the kind of very immediate sort of connecting and kind of conversation that happened between the people that were involved in the action. That I think that was a really big that hadn't necessarily come into kind of the initial conversations that Ros and I had about that work, but then it became apparent that was really the thing, that sort of way that the action created a space to connect with other people in intimate ways. And I guess like tactility being the kind of like the driver, the thing that held us all together, or the tactility of clay. Yeah, I suppose like when were you sitting on the grass and kind of watching in that way, or
No,
do you have
I saw your performance at Watch This Space.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think it was dusk, and we just arrived, and you guys had just started, and basically for the people listening, I felt like there was like almost like a block of clay that was held between your body and it. Is it Roz's?
Yes.
And you were kind of rolling and dancing and holding this clay kind of. It was kind of like you were protecting it. I don't know. At first I was like, oh, this is a bit weird. I'm going to be weird. But it was really moving, and something I've talked about in this podcast over and over is that clay has agency. And, you know, and I think that performance really highlighted that you were co-creating meaning with the clay. Yeah.
That's really cool that came across, and that's kind of where you got to it in terms of thinking about it. Because I think like I did have some I suppose concerns is the word, about bringing this quite sort of unconventional approach to clay into the kind of the Triennale space. But yeah, I guess was definitely kind of happy that like, you know, it felt good to do. But I suppose like that performance. So like the performance that Just Roz and I did at Watch This Space definitely was sort of digging down into that sort of question of who moves who. And I think in the sort of times of us Roz and I working together, it's quite hard to make clay dance or to dance clay. Like, I suppose, it's probably why there's not a whole dance clay kind of sort of world happening necessarily. But yeah, I think we decided that we really wanted to bring more dance into it, rather than, I think maybe what the sort of clay process had been quite heavy, and the sort of objectness of clay, you know, it's like we're working with clay to make it an object or a thing, that had been quite dominant in terms of moving the process, or like moving the collaboration along. And so we really were like pushing into bringing dance into it in a much more substantial way. And we had spent 2 weeks before the Triennale in residence at Tamara Date Farm, and which was a sort of Watch This Space supported residency, and just gave us like 2 really amazing weeks to kind of basically do what we were doing on stage, to kind of roll around with clay and kind of really think about how it moved and how you could be moved by it. And I suppose we were working with Feldenkrais quite a lot. Which are you familiar with that practice? I think I'm no expert, but I think basically Feldenkrais it sort of works on the principles of how we learn to walk from kind of babies that aren't moving at all to kind of crawling to walking, and a sort of Feldenkrais session will take you into like really specific parts of your body and types of movement, and you kind of go into them and repeat them over and over again in like a really focused and slow, intentional way. So I guess it just, kind of underpinning the whole kind of development of that work with this really slow, intentional kind of coming into an awareness of your body allowed me to kind of, I'm not sure what it felt like for us, but it allowed me to kind of slow down to the speed of clay and actually listen to when it was like putting pressure on my body. So then I could choose to either move with it or kind of push against it. And and it was sort of, it was kind of, it felt kind of quite raw and intimate. So, and I suppose, so like you feeling like, oh, like what's going on there? I'm like maybe looking in a private moment or something. I'm putting words in your mouth, but
definitely, there was a vulnerability in that performance, and I think that's what kind of hooked me in, I guess, and made me connect with it, rather than it just looking like a contemporary art piece. It was like there was a rawness and a vulnerability that you could really feel. Yeah.
And I think that's, I mean, I think that feeling is not very often in the making of ceramics, because you feel that in the studio when the clay is soft and wet and you're kind of, things are moving and changing, and then you put it in the kiln and you like stop it in time, and then you're, the sort of intimacy and rawness is in the studio with you, and you kind of put this object which has kind of progressed into another kind of stage realm state out into the world. And I think it's I mean, you can definitely make fired work look raw, and I think you can bring intimacy into it as well. But we just
I definitely think there's some works that rawness and that emotional vulnerability you can feel when you're a viewer, but I think it's probably much harder to do than be present with it in the moment.
I mean, I feel like for me, the making, like the actual moment when the clay is soft and tactile and so plastic and movable, and there's like full potential there, like that is the part that's really exciting. And so a question that I've always kind of been asking all along the way is, how can I bring more of this, which I feel really excited and connected to? So surely other people will kind of, how can I share this this with other people, sharing this with other people? How can I put this into a fired object, but then to start working with it in a raw, in its kind of plastic sort of raw state, and then also working with rods has been you sort of start to flesh out like what clay is and what it can do, and this sort of specific special things that clay can do for us as sort of like collaborators, interactors, viewers, receivers of the message and materiality of clay.
It's probably important that we go back a step. I've just jumped straight into your performance work, but your practice is broader than that, isn't it? Would you like to speak about your practice kind of at a more broader scale?
Maybe. I don't like I mean, I suppose
you've made works that are, you've played with that tactility in the static objects too.
I suppose I think like the only reason why I'm like a little bit ambivalent or hesitant is just it's been a little while since it's actually been a little while since I've made, well, it's not true. I did make a fired work last year. One quite large one, so I'm still doing it. But I can chat about the sort of more object-based practice. If you can kind of, if that's actually a real distinction.
I guess it's just like, how do all these things play into your practice? And I can see your passion for that kind of performance work, and it feels like that's pretty zingy for you at the moment. So.
But I suppose like another really big thing that I like to think through clay with is place, and I guess I guess the studio, the side of making like the studio is a place, but also broader in terms of like the different places that I've lived and worked over time. And I think I guess I'm really thinking a lot about that up here, is kind of continuing to develop a methodology around place-based or place-based or site responsive making through clay. And I suppose that sort of inquiry into place and sort of I think using clay to do that has really allowed me to kind of understand the specificities of clay and the complexities of place, and actually bringing that into an object. But it's definitely taken the form of kind of I had a moment of making ceramic socks in response to spending time in Mbantua, like maybe in 2018, and then I've definitely made kind of I suppose like fairly sculptural vessels that sort of try to be ask questions, or sort of within them I'm trying to ask questions like, if a mountain was a vessel, what would it look like? So maybe like one of my first like public solo shows was a show called About Place, and I'd sort of spent 6 months driving around the States and kind of looking at these incredible landscapes and really sort of traveling from national park to national park and just being very kind of affected by the incredible beauty, the scale, the materiality, like the rocks, the kind of hot pools of Yosemite, the colors, and just, I suppose as I've kind of continued to go to different places and work in different places, that feeling of when you go to a place that's unfamiliar, you really like feel it and see it in high resolution. You're really kind of awake to it across all your senses. So I kind of like was sketching and kind of thinking a lot on this trip, and then came back and kind of made lots of vessel-esque works in response to kind of the landscape itself, the kind of experience of thinking back through memory, I guess, the sort of elusiveness of memory and how that kind of mediates our connection to an understanding of place. And I suppose like have sort of built on it since then. But I think I guess there's sort of always this niggling question, which I think and I don't know, maybe you can relate to this in terms of like having had a previous practice and then having this sort of strong connection with clay, and then how do those two things come together? I'm sort of really obsessed with this material and having these experiences, and I'm asking questions about place and, place in Australia, what it means to be in that country, what it means to be on various lands in that country. And then slowly they're kind of coming together. The triangle is like, I don't know, who knows where the tip is, but they just feel like they're getting closer. Like, and potentially making vessels is not necessarily the form that it needs to be taking at this point in time. But I really love vessels. There's something very special and particular about the kind of presence and sort of vesselness of a vessel. So I'm not done with them, but I just think at the moment things like performance or definitely much more sculptural sort of, I guess the work that I made last year was a wall piece, sort of like landscape-esque wall piece. So I think definitely centered on kind of the surface of the clay, the impressions of me that it holds, and I guess in this residency, the impressions that it kind of can hold of the landscape is something that I'm kind of pushing into a little bit literally. Is that kind of making sense?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And it's just like my brain's just going a million miles an hour as it always does. I'm like, place and people, and because I think, Holly, I first came to know about your work and you as a person generally with connections to Central Australia.
Okay.
Yeah, which is a place I visited a couple of years ago and just felt like a very huge trip to visit that part of the world, and especially engaging with First Nations culture in people living in their homelands, which is something that's very different to the East Coast. Yeah,
definitely. That I think I owe a lot to that part of the world, just in terms of teaching me about the complexities of place, and I suppose how material fits into that. And in back in 2018, I mean, my twin sister is a linguist, and so there's a kind of family connection there where her work quite quickly took her to different places in the Northern Territory. She was in Kununurra for a period of time, working with Muloobinba and the language centre up there, and then was working in Yundamu at their bilingual school there, with the Warlpiri community that lived there, and so I guess just in terms of, I've always been going to visit her and kind of have helped her with the various kind of comings and goings or moving, have done quite a lot of trips up and down the Stuart Highway, which is just, if you haven't done it yet, you really should think about it, because it just kind of, I think it really allows you to feel feel this country in a way that is it's a very different feeling to sort of skirting around the coastline. So yeah, there's a family connection, and Gret is still there. She lives in Mbantua now, and she's got a couple of beautiful kids and her partner there. And but so there was always an interest in kind of going there, and I was going there a little bit. And then I had an opportunity to do a series of residencies in 2018. It was a sort of transitory residency, which meant that it was 3 months, and I did a month in Mbantua. I watched this space. I did a month in Macquarie Regional Arts, and then a month in Darwin at Accomplice Creative. And yeah, I guess like the sort of whole experience was I was working with Brit Guy, who's the producer, and Accomplice Creative is her sort of her thing. And so that was kind of the structure of what was going on. And I was pretty fresh out of I'd gone down to Melbourne to do a bit more study, just an honours year, to get thinking about this kind of question of context and community of practice, and to sort of start learning to think a bit more critically about the practice. So I guess my mind was like primed to be asking the questions. And so I kind of arrived in Mbantua and was sort of like, well, yeah, wow, what can I even make here? Like I just I think I just need to kind of listen and like I was kind of listen and watch and walk and kind of slow right down, and just kind of it was interesting. It was quite, and I think it's sort of taken a little while to maybe, I mean, I'm still untangling. So yeah, the actual making I found quite hard. It was sort of like a need to develop a bit of an architecture around I guess, the priorities, the kind of questions that you're asking, the way that you're connected to place, not through your practice, but just like as a person, a bit of leveling with like who I am in that place. The kind of making aspect was complicated, but then that experience, I guess like with the support of Brit, I was put in touch with a few different spaces where I was kind of running workshops and teaching. And I worked with a little group at one of the Tangentyere town camps, and took a bag of clay out a couple of times to work with some of the people living there, kids and children, and a couple of the fellas came through. But that was like a real kind of eye opener, or lesson in just the power of clay, like that as a tool to connect with people and to kind of traverse sort of the cultural and linguistic boundaries. Like a lot of the kids especially, they're speaking Aranda and Western Aranda, but that didn't matter. You can make a footy, you can make like a snake, you can make all these things. Like you don't need words to do that. You just like the sort of clay does the thing, and it kind of sat between us and like held us together and allowed us to kind of get on with it. And I sort of had a series of kind of different experiences of teaching with different groups, and I did get to go visit the Hermannsburg Potters out at Ndari, which was sort of my first meeting of them, and that was really exciting. Just to see this room of women kind of just fully immersed in their making and busy with their kind of coiling and painting, and that was a really good. Still, it's a very exciting place, that one. So I suppose that sort of just with where I was at in my practice and kind of the place that it is and the questions that it gets you asking, if you're ready to ask them or you want to ask them. I think that kind of like set up in some ways has become a bit of a foundation for like how I'm thinking about place. And I think that the kind of object making is like slowly starting to catch up to that. It's taken a little while, because I guess like there's all the strands. There's the kind of the technical skills that you sort of need to be able to manipulate and move clay. There's the questions that you're asking. There's like also life happening alongside it. That's just 3 strands. There's definitely more than that, but how to kind of weave them together, and it takes time. it takes time, and I think it's good to keep asking them in earnest, and you just don't know where it will take you. You just don't know where you're gonna get to. I think that's been it's never been a question of like I want to be a community artist or I want to be a performer. Like none of that. It's just like I have these questions about how this material, I have a love for this material, and I have questions about how it can kind of help me connect well with the places that I'm in and with it as a material. And that's kind of, I'm excited and enjoying that journey.
Yeah, and I can tell. Yeah, it's great to talk to you at this stage, hey, because I think the other element that I feel like you've alluded to, but anyone who's followed you, Holly, knows that community is such an important part of your practice, and it sounds like that Central Australian experience was huge for that. And I think, working with First Nations people, community and connection is everything between each other, between place, between everything. Yeah,
totally. The relationships are so important, and and I suppose like not, and they take time to kind of develop. It's not like an instantaneous, like we meet one time and then we're connected. It's like it's been really great to be able to return to the desert and kind of continue to kind of get to know that community. Grateful that they keep on opening up to me, and grateful that my sister is there, and I can kind of there's like a few things that hold me in that place. But I guess going sort of forward and like how maybe this interest in community has moved me in different directions. I mean, I guess I was sort of had a little bit to do, or I was on the TACA, the Oz Ceramics board for a little while, which was a really great experience just in terms of kind of understanding the ceramics community. And I mean, in a certain way, I guess, not every ceramicist in Australia is a member of TACA, but they could be. But I suppose like understanding that kind of organization and how they're operating. So that's like, one way of kind of bringing a community together. And I suppose, and then I suppose this thing of community is sort of what maybe got me to this residency. I'm not sure, but like it feels like there's something about this. There's something about SSW that is, I think they're going through a moment of kind of transformation where it is really about sort of cementing themselves in this community that they're in and kind of opening out to the kind of broader community. I've sort of like, there's lots of different kind of jumping off points that I could talk to. Communities. It's a funny word here because there's sort of there's many communities.
But I think that's like for me something I've found through clay is community. So I don't know, there's something for me, how you were talking about your practice and your ideas and them kind of coming together. Like clay and community, they just seem so caught up with each other.
I
don't know, it's funny, and like I guess part of me thinks, is it just because to fire clay, or it's a very resource intensive practice, like not everyone can own their own kiln, so is that why studios kind of come together, or is it actually something a little bit more woo and a little bit more deep about clay that's bringing people together?
There's definitely some woo in there. Big woo. You can call it lots of different things, but I think woo's not bad. I think maybe before, I mean, working with TACA was quite a formal experience of community, but before that, like I only have had my own kiln for the last couple of years, but I did a lot of reaching out to a lot of people and asking to use kilns, and was always met with like a I think pretty much like 99% of the time was met with a sure, when when do you want to do that? Which invariably was like soon, because I'm like to push against a deadline. So I think just like I think that there's definitely an openness to the community of people in Australia that are making with clay, and that's sort of demonstrated through the way that resources are shared, things like kilns. I've always worked in kind of group studio spaces, which I think, you know, have kind of come together around this thing of, well, we all need to gather around the common resource of kilns and space, and, you know, big things like slab rollers and stuff. So yeah, I guess I was in a group studio down in North Melbourne, which was kind of all potters or all ceramicists when I first graduated from RMIT. And actually before that, like, I was very lucky to have a little over a year at Kiln at Experimental Ceramics in Glebe, working out of a group studio. It's like, it's part of the process. It's like, you know, the thing that I really love is the kind of clay when it's soft and tactile and full of possibility, but also, like, I really like people, and I like practicing alongside people, not necessarily like in each other's pockets and like chatting all the time, but just like working parallel. Yeah, I mean, yeah. And so I moved to Newcastle. I'm based in Newcastle these days. And when I moved to Newcastle, my partner and I didn't really have any network or connections there, really. It was sort of like my folks had kind of moved back up to I guess like northwest New South Wales, like where they grew up, sort of around, or like before COVID times and like during COVID times. And then we were in Melbourne, and my partner is also a bodyboarder, so it was kind of like closer to the sort of like Upper Hunter, like Liverpool Plains areas, close to the beach, affordable. And so I sort of, Newcastle ticked all these boxes, and that sort of became the place where we decided to move. And then I was sort of, as I was thinking about moving my studio over, it was kind of like, where am I, like, how am I going to meet artists? And I think like finding a group studio was a really big part of that. And I sort of locked onto this place called the Creator Incubator, which I then was able to get a studio in, and that's just been, it's ticking all the boxes of, I mean, it's not just ceramicists, it's also industrial designers, sculptors, painters. I guess we're getting a little away from specifically the clay community, but more just like, I really believe in the importance of kind of creative communities around individual practitioners to kind of, because it's a pretty tough gig at times, and just to have people that kind of understand that, and are kind of, but also like as committed and obsessed as you, and feeling the woo, like moved by the woo. And so I suppose like like to come back to community, but maybe like a different way that I've been able to work with a specific community recently, and kind of relates back to being at the Creator Incubator. A fellow artist at the Creator Incubator put me forward for a project with the Community Disability Alliance Hunter, and they have a project called the Hunter Deafblind Project, and the group that kind of gathers within that project wanted to make a public artwork for Deafblind Awareness Week last year. And so, I guess like that, I mean, it's not my sort of first experience of stepping into a community, but I think like it was a first experience of stepping into a community with quite a specific outcome in mind, like an actual kind of object outcome in mind. And it was really exciting, and it was really exciting. Like, it was a lot of learning on the run, like really exciting in the way that the tactility of clay really came to life in a very like vital and essential way. And like the sort of people aspect of it was really compelling as well. Like this great bunch of people. So the way that the project worked, there was the Hunter Deafblind Project had a committee, a group of 3 people Stephen Hallen and Enya Savory and Carly DeMatzer, and I guess the project draws from, I think there's definitely people that live in Newcastle and the Hunter region, but someone like Carly was coming up from Sydney, so I think it's like a pretty broad community of people living with, I guess, sensory loss or impairment, or like dual sensory loss or impairment. And so the committee came to me with this desire to make a work, and I guess that was sort of, I guess the thing about it being public was it being kind of gifted to this sort of gifted to the broader community, and to be something that could kind of connect this community with the broader community. And they had this idea that they wanted to work with the sea star as a motif. In their words, the sea star thrives without sight or sound, like in the same way that they do. So I think, it was quite a fitting kind of symbol to be working with. And they also were interested in sort of integrating or kind of, or sort of thinking about how some of Helen Keller's poetry could fit into the mix somewhere. So we worked a little bit with Helen Keller's poem, The Song of the Stone Wall. And so from there, I guess I sort of saw my job as kind of understanding or sort of like sifting through the different kind of possibilities for different tactile experiences, or like sort of tactile surfaces. So thinking about unglazed clay, glazed clay, different kinds of glaze. So it's kind of like some of our meetings involved me bringing in just like lots of different test tiles for everyone to be feeling and kind of understanding. And then I guess it was also about designing a process that everybody, so the group meets up every fortnight and sort of all comes together for a kind of social time. And so it was about thinking about how I could sort of design a bit of a process to put into that social meetup for everybody that was attending to be able to contribute. So very quickly it took the form of tiles. And so we were sort of like talking a lot about tiles that were, if you're thinking about sort of the ocean and moving water, how would you kind of create that texture in a tile? So there was lots of kind of ocean or like water tiles to create the kind of landscape that these sea stars would fit into. And then I had like a bit of a template that people were able to use to kind of be creating a textured tile and then cutting out sea stars or starfish. And then I sort of like took all this, and it was just so I mean I'm clearly a total frother, but I just I just found it very exciting to see the different responses to, I mean, because I suppose like some people were kind of getting quite sort of were like really kind of taking that quite literally, and other people were just like having a play with their hands on the clay. But just the range of kind of textures and expressions was very exciting for me. And then so I kind of then my job was kind of to fire these tiles, and Lake Macquarie City Council came on board and offered us this really great site in the All Varieties, so I suppose like All Abilities playground down in Spears Point Park. And so we installed, I guess, I mean, I sort of talk about it as like a tile mural, I suppose, but there was 4 panels of tiles that sort of wrapped around this, I don't know, I suppose a column. It's like a sort of square column. And quite a sort of, quite a great kind of like form and sort of, quite a great format or form for the work to take, because you can really like walk around this block and kind of have your hands on it, and sort of be experiencing the different textures that came out of the making. And it was like pretty pressurized towards the end there, but we got it over the line, and it was ready to open on, I think it was July the 7th or something like this, or the 6th, July the 6th. Like the opening was a great time. Like the experience of opening was everybody kind of going up to this work and kind of having their hands on it and kind of feeling for whether they could find their tile or like each other's tiles. And it's just, it was really very cool. I mean, that's kind of what you want as a ceramicist. You just want people to have their hands on your work. But it's quite hard to make people do that sometimes. Or maybe a better way to answer that is like context is everything. Context is important. But that sort of like tactility of clay was really just was like an exciting thing to follow through that project and to connect with that group of people through.
That's awesome, Holly. Yeah, sounds like a really great project, and awesome that it gets to live on in that kind of, like that's what objects should be. if we fire
exactly.
away,
Yeah.
and they can keep, I guess, so they can keep kind of giving that sensory engagement. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, like if you find yourself in Lake Macquarie at Spears Point Park, head into the playground and see if you can find it. Get your hands on it. Yeah, I suppose if you're working with site, look for a big blue and yellow tower. We were sort of Enya kind of came in with, yeah, she was sort of wanting to make sure that people that were working with site would be able, like, and I suppose like maybe color blindness would be able to experience it in like in a sort of rich way, and so that kind of guided the color choice of blues and yellows. So yeah, I really learned a lot, and it was really great to be, a real privilege to be a part of that project. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing. It sounds
Oh.
like you give a lot. I could just tell how passionate you are, and that, these projects, we give a lot when we do them as ceramists.
We do, yeah.
Artists. And, I think sometimes being put into situations, also like Central Australia, we get put into these situations where we're still working out our place in them.
Yeah.
That. So I don't know, how do you go balancing like self-care and well-being with like your practice and community and all that stuff? It's a big one, I know.
It's such a big one, but also like it's really important because I guess you are. This is like a sort of a pearly line of wisdom that's come through a friend of a friend. But you are a finite resource. We don't have endless amounts of energy, and so you've got to find that balance. I don't know. I'm not sure if the work-life balance is like really. It's not like a sort of seesaw where it's like perfectly flat. I'm starting to realize that I don't think that's what you're aiming for. I think, there's probably going to be times in a practice where you are just going flat chat, and you kind of need to be doing that to kind of build the intensity to kind of get a project over the line. But I guess it's just about being aware that and preparing for that before you're like in the middle of it and like, but yeah, I think I did sort of, I think I pushed myself a little bit hard last year and did have to kind of take a moment to recalibrate, collect my thoughts, collect my collect myself. And I mean, I guess it's a bit of a bore, but we do have to pay the rent. So I think probably I think where I went a little bit wrong was just like being way too like not really thinking about the financial imperative, which is just, it's such a bore to think about, and I just don't really think, for me anyway, that thinking about making money makes good work. But you do have to do it, so you've got to find a way to kind of hold and protect the things that you find exciting about your practice and then you got to kind of you got to be having some income coming in some way that's workable. I guess I could answer this question just in terms of like how I mean, I think I've had moments of like pushing pretty hard and kind of feeling quite exhausted at the end, but maybe have been younger and have been happy to kind of burn the candles at both ends. But I think the sort of like exhaustion last year was of a slightly different, like maybe deeper quality, where it was like, okay, no, I'd actually need to sort of make some changes around how I operate. And I like took kind of a couple of months out to work a full-time job, which was I mean, it's kind of interesting in terms of like putting my anthropological glasses on and being like, okay, full-time work, good to know, in an office, like good to know that this is how this works. I mean, like it was great to have colleagues in that context and have that kind of experience of people in community. Like everyone has to be very connected and kind of like working together to get stuff over the line in that context too. I suppose just like having a fortnightly paycheck come in was like the kind of relief of that was like fairly instant. I don't think I sort of fully clocked like this sort of like simmering anxiety of like, invoice to invoice like that. It's tough. It's really tough to kind of keep that keep on top of that and keep it rolling in. And I mean, yeah, I think there's people that do have full-time practices and do a really amazing job of it, and I'm sort of, you know, people like, I know, like Shannon Garson, the conversation that you had with Shannon Garson and Sarah Rayner, they talk, I mean, yeah, both like basically full-time practitioners, right? They have some really great insights into the finance of being a sort of creative practitioner and doing that full-time. And God, much admiration, such energy.
I think though, like an interesting thing Shannon said in that is that you have to be okay with not having much money.
Yeah, I think that it was like, yeah,
like she was really straight up about that, and it's so true. Like there's times when you won't have much.
Yeah.
As you're building a career and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And also there's do you want to make money out of your practice, or do you want to keep that separate? I mean, there's so many different ways of being in the world, hey?
Oh my gosh, yeah, totally. Yeah, that's like, it's a really good point that, like, yeah, I mean, this is just my perspective, you know, like this is just, you know, my feeling of like, I don't think I make good work when I'm thinking about like, will it sell? That's just where I'm at with it. And so I think
that's
probably
so good to know that about yourself. Like that's
the
key, isn't it? Is to know yourself and what is right for you. But it also takes like slowing down to sometimes know that.
Slowing down and actually like trying something different when you pick back up again. So that'll be the test for me, whether I can actually try something a little bit different. But I think, you know, also it's all okay. Like I've definitely had some pretty low moments the last 12 months but more so around kind of working full time and being like, wow, I'm so disconnected from like the practice sits in me in a way that like that's the way that I'm connecting with people in the world and I'm thinking through that space. So to kind of have that, just like I totally just like severed myself from that for a period in time, which I think I did need to do. But that was quite a lot to kind of work through. But yeah, time sometimes can be the thing that just like is the salve. I mean, yeah, and I suppose like when you have savings and you've kind of worked hard and saved up, you can do things like this residency that I'm on. Like I think if I just was like pushing it and kind of doing full-time artist and kind of teaching workshops and making practice work and juggling all the balls, I don't think I really would have like seriously been able to kind of save up to get here. So yeah. It's like you gotta be real about things. Like this is the world that we're living in right now, so you got to play the game a little bit. but I think I sort of, I guess I got to a point where I needed to take a break, and I sort of needed to create a space to kind of reconfigure or just like rethink what practice looks like. And I think the residency sort of fits into that in a way where it's like, this is the time where I'm reconnecting with my physical making practice and thinking a lot about clay and community and how the kind of clay and community comes back into the clay-based practice, which is kind of interested in place and I guess identity, you know, what it means to be a person in different places. And I think was definitely kind of this little kind of light on the horizon of like, I've got this time booked in like at that point. So I'm just kind of working towards that. And
I think that something that I had a little look at the residency online, and I think the interesting thing is that you're not there alone. It looks like you're there with some other practitioners. So
Again,
the clay community.
The clay community. So I just like, definitely always consciously trying to put myself into kind of in with groups of people. Like I like people. I like hanging out. I'm curious. I like to know how other people are doing it. So the kind of the title of this residency is a group residency. And they run lots of different residency programs, but with the group, there's 4 of us here for this one, and we're here for a month. I think in the application process there was definitely, you sort of needed to kind of talk about or talk to why you why it would be suitable to kind of do a group residency, and you know what it is that you sort of find important about working collectively. I mean, we're like all definitely working on our own practices, but our sort of workbenches are kind of like side by side, and we're living together, and just like very much moving in and out of each other's spaces. And there is one other ceramicist, and then there's two artists, one who has more of a social sort of based practice, and then one who I guess seems quite sort of concept driven, but I guess works with materials and lots of found materials out in the sort of out in the landscape, industrial landscape, and pulls them back in and kind of sort of pulls them apart and understands how they fit into the human story. So yeah, there's like different perspectives, different material perspectives, different kinds of ideas about what a practice is, which are really great to just kind of be alongside. I guess like the workshop itself, in terms of like what we have access to, there's a really, I think it's, I don't know exactly when it was renovated, but it's like a nice fresh big ceramic studio, which I think was relatively recently renovated, and has this beautiful wall of test tiles and lots of shelf space and like the kiln room, and like lots of big workbenches in the middle, lovely sort of skylights, so like good natural lights, a really beautiful space, and then a ceramics technician who's in there answering all our questions. And then there's also a metal working workshop, and then there's the facility to do stone carving and also metal forging. So yeah, there's kind of like I think like I've been interested in getting to know metal a little bit more, just as a material to kind of like push clay against, to kind of understand. I don't know, like when you understand something through something it's not. So it's a kind of like compare and contrast maybe. But yeah, metal is weirdly similar to ceramics when it's hot. So it does like it's like the opposite. Like the heat for metal is the thing that like makes it malleable, whereas for clay, it's kind of shifting in a different direction, where that's the thing that makes it stop in its tracks. So yeah, kind of interested in that intersection. So I think I'm kind of just like, I guess if you have any specific questions about the residency, feel free to ask. But
what's a normal day at the residency like?
So we're 2 weeks out of 4 down, so like we're halfway through, I guess. And I think at this point everyone's like pretty deep in their kind of like default mode. So for me, yeah, it's kind of get up, I do a little bit of reading, a little bit of journaling, maybe some stretching, maybe a bit of like, I don't know, 10 minutes of mindfulness, just to like, do the things. And then the studio is literally like, it's literally 2 minutes down the road. So straight to the studio, and then I guess my and then you can kind of work all day, and I have been sort of in the studio, breaks for lunch and dinner, but then also just like into the night too. Like we have 24-hour access, so in theory you could be here all the time, but no, we're all being pretty sensible and getting some sleep in, but then also just like definitely all investing quite a lot of time in just being here. And yeah, I mean, 4 weeks is a long time to be kind of like super productive every day. So I think we're definitely kind of, well, I'm definitely riding waves of kind of like I'm in it, and then I'm kind of like, oh, like I'm feeling, the energy winds down and I need to take a bit of a break, and I'm thinking a lot about this idea and I just don't want to think about it anymore. So like, you're kind of like coming up against yourself like the whole way through, but also then the point is to kind of be in that and feeling those feelings. But then also, if you don't want to be making, you can be reading, or if you don't want to be reading, you can be walking. And yeah, like my sort of studio sessions, in inverted commas, some of them have been taking clay out into the sort of surrounding landscape. There's lots of kind of, I guess, roads through the hills that you can be walking on, and I've been playing with taking pressings sort of my body against different textures in the landscape. So yeah, I guess like just, I mean, quite a sort of I guess I was going to say like simple action. It is kind of simple, but it's also like infinitely complex. Like the kind of in the encounter, the sort of I guess like the way that's sort of grounding thoughts around how to encounter place, in like literal, but also like literal, but sort of like magical ways in the way that clay is. And I guess we're sort of, I suppose like it's interesting, like all four of us have sort of naturally sync in different ways. Like we'll kind of all, like even in the arc of like how everyone's progressing through, like emotionally, all kind of, just in terms of the general feeling about being here, there's like definitely days where we're all like, oh, it's a tired day. But just like kind of being in that together, and then like times when we're all industrious and just kind of like bouncing off each other, that's really great. So there's days that are a bit more structured. So when we did the forge induction, that was kind of like an induction, but also intro to forging. So we were all together for sort of 4 hours, just like heating up the steel and then like hammering it out, and that was really that was very cool. Everything about it, and for things like the forge that can't be on all the time. I guess you kind of like light the forge and get it heated up, and so that's more like there's a need to do that all together. And same with the stone carving. They've got I guess sort of contractors that come in. Is that the word for them? Contractors. I guess it's more like freelancers who come in. So there's a kind of Jimmy, the forge guy, who came in and led us through the forge, and then Lewis, who has come in and done the stone carving with us, and they're sort of practitioners, but also interested in teaching and being a part of this community. I think one other thing, in terms of it being a group residency and how the Scottish Sculptural Workshop is kind of holding us in that space. There's the workshops, there's the kind of our workbenches, the different sort of technicians that we are supported by, and the kind of I guess like office staff or sort of programs kind of managers, directors, but they like in the first week there was a couple of there's some lovely programming where we kind of took a walk together out to Macquarie, which is sort of like a little offering to kind of get us out into the landscape, and walking is great, walking together is great. And then also we had a sauna all together, but like in the first week, which is great. Just like getting sweaty together kind of definitely breaks the ice, and gets the kind of conversation going. I think there's definitely been some intentional kind of thinking around how to bring the group together, and I'm definitely feeling very held by the space and the kind of thoughtfulness that's gone into it. Yeah,
that's amazing. It sounds like you're like right in it too, like because you're 2 weeks into 4 weeks, you must be just like right in it. So it's probably hard to like reflect and look, but like it's so good just hearing like what a day looks like. It's something we go, residencies, and you're like, well, what does that mean? So thank you for sharing, Holly. That's great.
Oh no, my pleasure. Hopefully, I mean, it's funny, the question of like what does the day look like. I think it's like a question you should ask to all different kinds of people. I'm always so fascinated about what other people's days look like. I don't know, the office worker, but also the ceramicist. But I think it's just like, and it's like, time and space is such a gift, but you still come up against yourself. Like you're always tested by your own kind of the limits of your imagination or your kind of energy, and so I think it's I'm definitely just like all in, but also I think in developing what a day looks like, it's also thinking about, well, no, I need to, and it's the basics. It's like I need to have my 8 hours of sleep if possible, and I need to, do my stretching. That kind of makes me feel good, and I need to make sure that I'm eating well, and so like all of that is a part of it, as well as kind of being intense and in the studio and like getting obsessed and getting lost in it.
So it's like 4 weeks of reflecting your practice generally, like the ups and downs.
Yeah, totally. Yes.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. It's like a sort of intense hit of what could be a whole year of like rolling through.
Yeah. Well, I can't
yeah.
wait to talk to you at the end and see how it all panned out. Yeah.
Yeah. We'll see. We'll pop out. Yeah, I'm sure there'll be lots of thoughts.
Yeah, that's exciting. Is there anything else you'd like to share, Holly?
Is there? There probably is, but I feel like we've had a good chat. It's been really lovely to talk to you, Jane. Thank you for listening, for what's the word? Encouraging, asking the questions, getting the thoughts going.
It's been wonderful talking to you, Holly. And people can find you on the usual platforms, can't they?
Yeah, Instagram. I don't have a website. Maybe that can be something that I focus on here. Building a website. It's been on my to-do list for like a decade. But yes, you can find me on Instagram. Yeah, reach out. I mean, if anyone's interested in the residency, definitely drop me a line. And yeah.
Oh, thanks, Holly. We'll catch up soon.
Yeah, chat soon. See you, Jane. Bye.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode. We hope you enjoyed. You can find us on Instagram at birdsofclay_podcast. Please feel free to send us any questions or comments. And if you could leave us a review on whatever platform you're listening on, that would be amazing. We'll see you next time.